We are doing a live taping of our show Undercurrents, so welcome everybody. We really appreciate you being here. And of course, we are so pleased to be joined today by Senator Chuck Grassley, who is with us now. Just a little bit about Senator Grassley. He has been representing Iowa in the Senate since 1981. Incredibly long tenure, has seen so much happen in Washington, D.C. since first coming to D.C. He meets with everyone in every county, so all of Iowa's 99 counties, as you just heard, every single year. Incredible. Few people know Iowa as well as Chuck Grassley. And he is, of course, one of the most famous users of social media in all of American politics. So on that note, join me in welcoming Senator Chuck Grassley.
How you doing?
Thank you, Senator. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, you bet.
Well, Senator, you're also pro tem right now of the upper chamber. What does that responsibility entail for people who may not be familiar with the inner workings of the Senate?
Well, I open the Senate most every day. I don't have to do that. Some other senator could do it. It gives me an opportunity to be on the floor to give a 1 or 2 minute speech before the leaders come. You sign all of the enrolled bills. You have certain appointment power, but it really isn't power, because in most of those appointments, you take if it's a bipartisan appointment, you take the recommendations of Senator Schumer or Senator Thune, the leaders of the two respective caucuses, and you just perform. It's kind of ministerial. So I don't like to think that there's a lot of power with it, but it is one of the 4 political positions mentioned in the Constitution. So obviously it's important from the standpoint of the Constitution. But I always have people in Iowa say, well, you're President Pro Tem, you ought to get this done or get that done. I have to explain to them I had 1 vote out of 100 before I was President Pro Tem, and I have 1 vote now. And I don't want to brag about anything else. But I think the extent to which over a period of years you establish yourself as authority in certain areas, or you just, friendships you make, relationships, what people think about you is worth a heck of a lot more than being President Pro Tem of the United States Senate, as if you want to accomplish things for Iowa.
Fascinating. And I actually wanted to ask you a little bit about the news of the day at the top here, because we're in a whirlwind news cycle. It's been a very, very intense 24 hours. And I know you are in constant communication with your constituents, with the people of Iowa. You know them very well. So I'm curious, this peace deal that President Trump seems to have achieved feels fragile. It feels like it's something that could be broken. It feels like it's almost a tenuous deal. But I'm curious if you think that's true, and how important to the average Iowan who has seen their tax dollars fund many foreign entanglements over the years, how important is the president's ability to maintain this remarkable achievement to the average person in Iowa?
I don't think Iowans are different than Americans. They prefer peace to war. They prefer diplomacy to war. I think it is kind of tenuous, but it's held for a while. And I think from the Israelis' point of view, they're done. They've accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. I think it's not a war against Iran. It's against the war against Iran's nuclear capability, and I think I haven't had the briefing on it that we're going to get Thursday, but we assume that what's been reported so far, that maybe it has decimated the Iranian nuclear program. I think it proves that the president that says he's a peacemaker, he had 60 days. He wanted to negotiate. At the end of 60 days, he put on another 2 weeks. It really turned out to be 2 days. I think he worked very closely with the Israelis, and I think he had plans for the Israelis to accomplish a heck of a lot before we put our efforts in jeopardy. I think now that this peace agreement, or no, it's not an agreement yet, it's a ceasefire. If it holds, you don't know what the Ayatollah is thinking right now, but maybe it'll bring about peace for another decade or two, or maybe longer than that. You just can't predict.
Right, God willing. Now, we're in the midst of a populist moment where many people inspired by the unfortunate example of Joe Biden are calling on older politicians to pass the torch to a younger generation. Now, you, Senator, were born in the 1930s. You have seen so much change in the world. You have been here in Washington through so much change. And I'm just curious, what keeps you going here in DC? It seems like a very difficult job. It seems like a stressful position. But your point about being Senator Pro Tem compared to having one vote before and after and, being able to help the people of Iowa in the same capacity, that was a really interesting point. So is that what keeps you going, the relationships you've built up over years with your constituents and with power brokers here in DC?
First of all, I think it starts with my family. A wife of 70 years has been on my side during all this period of time that I've been in the United States Senate. I think the responsibilities that we have to leave a better nation than we received, this is, I think, since the Pilgrims came here, this is about 9 generations. Each generation's left the country better than the previous generation. That's a little bit in question now, but it's my responsibility to continue that as best we can. And I think another thing that has helped, being number one in the United States Senate as far as seniority is concerned, puts me in a position for my number one interest, the state of Iowa, to represent that. But it goes way beyond the state of Iowa. But I think it's just the problems the country confronts and your ability to help solve those problems.
Now, I went back and looked, and I think you joined Twitter, it was called Twitter at the time, in November of 2007. So you were on the cutting edge of social media, Senator. And I'm so curious how you believe that some of these new technologies and companies like YouTube, like Twitter, have changed the way that people like yourself communicate with the people of Iowa and the people of America.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm on a podcast, right?
Yes, that's right.
This is something we've found out in the 2024 election, made a big impact, particularly on people under 50 years of age or maybe under 40 years of age. So this is another opportunity. But let's get back whether I was maybe one of the first ones to get a fax machine, if anybody knows what a fax machine is. And I did satellite back to Iowa on once a month on a TV interview that I did. But whether it's that or radio programs I do, there's 3 that I do every week, but there's others I do once a month, maybe 10 or 12. You take all the media of communication. First of all, it's respect out of journalism, because journalism is a policeman policing the political system we have. It's to keep government constitutional, to keep those of us in government abiding by the law, being ethical, and all that. You expect the freedom of the press, the First Amendment, and the people that practice journalism to take that seriously and keep government functioning and reduce the cynicism that people have towards government or towards politicians. All of that is to build respect, because we may have the best constitution in the world and the longest living constitution in the world, but that very good piece of paper is useless if people don't have respect for it, for the institutions of government, and for those of us that serve in government. And the latter thing I said is where people have less respect, but it's up to our responsibility to make sure we keep it. But I think that whether it's Twitter or whether it's the fax machine or whether it's radio programs or whether it's on podcasts with you, representative government is a dialogue with our constituents or with people that aren't our constituents. Like I assume I'm talking now to a lot of people that are not Iowans.
And unfortunately, I am from Wisconsin, Senator, so.
I try to explain at my town meetings that I'm one half of the process of representing government. You, my constituents, the other one half, and this face-to-face meeting we're having is the best way to do it. But I only see a few thousand people face-to-face as I visit each one of the 99 counties every year for a Q&A. So I have to depend upon email and postal mail and telephones and any way people want to communicate with me, because I only see a few thousand people, but I got 3 1/10 million constituents. So I'm telling the people that come here, for you, but I'm also saying it to the other 3 1/10 million Iowans I never see, you're the other half of representative government. You got to have dialogue. I got to know what's on your mind. And this is just the best way to do it, but it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, and I'm actually curious about your perspective on journalism, because what you said is so accurate and often so forgotten by people in my industry. And I think the podcasters started to remind a lot of journalists that what the public expects from the media is a sense of the truth. It seems kind of quaint to say, but they want honesty, they want facts. And I'm sure you hear that from your constituents a lot. So how do you think journalism has changed? I mean, trust in media right now is tied for a record low. 2017, 2024, 2023, those were record lows for Americans' trust in journalism. So what have you seen happen to the media over your time here in DC?
I think the best evidence of the change, and it went on a long time before the last 4 years, but you saw journalists either not asking the right questions or were ignorant of the physical condition of Biden. And then after he's out of office and this becomes known to people, then they're talking that they should have policed the system better.
Right.
So I think it comes from the fact that maybe, and I'm going back maybe 20 years, but I don't think it's changed in 20 years. There's a poll about the media in Washington, D.C., about 90% of them being registered Democrats. So you see, you have it lopsided, and that's reflected maybe in the treatment that Biden got for 4 years. Look at the treatment that Trump gets now in his first term and continued in his second term. So it isn't going to change very quickly, and if it's going to change, it's going to have to start changing at the schools of journalism. That's the way I see it.
Or we need more people from Iowa farms to skip journalism school and just go straight into working as reporters. That would be great.
Yeah.
So you were a leader in tracking down some of the outrageous abuses of the intelligence community during the Russia collusion investigation. And interestingly enough, you've actually been an elected official here in DC since the days of the Church Committee or the post-Watergate investigation into some of the abuses of the intelligence community back then. Do you think Republicans got kind of too comfortable over time with the FBI and maybe let the oversight duties slip? Or was that something that really came about 2016 because of Donald Trump, that sort of put the FBI in a unique position? What do you make of how all of that unfolded against a Republican president, despite Republicans being very supportive of the FBI for decades?
Yeah. Well, I think, just think it went on in a Republican administration, the first Trump administration. Right. And I think, yes, there is great respect, maybe in both political parties, for the FBI. But then what we exposed, or what journalists exposed, as well as Chuck Grassley and other people,
journalists were behind Chuck Grassley on this one. You got there first.
Okay. Well, anyway, you find out that they can't be trusted, and that there's the word political weaponization is entirely legitimate. I think I proved that with what I exposed about Special Agent Tebow and a lot of other people that aren't as famous as him. But I mean, they actually had within their job in the FBI that we're going to see how we can get Trump. You know, this all goes back to a pretty basic principle of government, what you learn in 8th grade civics, checks and balances of government. We not only appropriate money, we not only pass laws, and that's not the end of it. You got a responsibility to make sure that the executive branch faithfully executes those laws. That's what it's all about. And then, you know, these big departments or even a small department, the people that head of it, they can't know what's going on underneath. They ought to be listening to their whistleblowers. So, you know, I think I have a reputation for taking most whistleblowing very seriously. And some of this stuff has been exposed. And then you find out they're retaliated against. Now we got a friendly administration in. We're getting some of these whistleblowers back into their job, or we're getting them back their reputation if they're going to another job, so that they can be able to see national security stuff and stuff like that. But you shouldn't treat whistleblowers that way. And if people like Christopher Wray and before him, Comey, if they listen to whistleblowers, this stuff would never happen unless they wanted it to happen. And I can't say they wanted it to happen, but you can't know what's going on below. And people that want, just patriotic people that I call whistleblowers, they just want the government to do what the government's supposed to do and spend the money the way government wants it spent. Or, I mean, the way Congress wants it spent, or the people of this country. So it's just important that Congress do its oversight work, and it's important that the executive branch listens to whistleblowers. There's no reason for a whistleblower to come to me if the people that are in management in that department from low to high start listening to them.
Yeah, and it occurs to me as we're talking that now there are 2 podcasters in charge of the FBI, and of course they're you know, have much more substantial backgrounds than humble podcasting. But Dan Bongino, obviously, and Kash Patel are both at the FBI. And Senator, some people, not just conservatives, are upset with them for comments that they made recently about the Epstein investigation. But just as you assess the first 6 months of Kash Patel's tenure atop the FBI. He's a reformer. Are you confident that reforms are getting made under Kash Patel, that things are going in the right direction?
Well, I can tell you for sure because it's mostly efforts I've had towards him. Everything that has been covered up in the first Trump administration without Trump knowing it, and in the Biden administration, we're getting the cooperation that I need to bring transparency to the government, to show what was wrong, and to get protection for the whistleblowers, getting them back their job. We're getting full cooperation on that. And we never got it out of Ray. You know, I sent when the new attorney general come in, I gave her a copy of 158 letters that were in the last 4 years that weren't answered. And about a third or maybe 40% of those came from the FBI. So they didn't show the proper respect for congressional oversight. And every one of them turned out to be a liar from the standpoint that when they come and at their nomination hearing, they're always asked, will you answer our letters? I keep telling people that come to my office now for me to interview them for their nomination confirmation, I say it's better if you say maybe instead of yes, because we don't get the answers that we're entitled to. And they said at their confirmation they was going to give us, answer our letters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And they have.
Well, this administration is making up for that. But you can imagine out of 158 letters in 6 months, I don't have the answer to all those.
So that number to me seems wild. And I'm curious if that's new, where, Congress has oversight and you just have FBI, DOJ not responsive to the Senate on some questions, on many questions. Is that something that you think is new to the last maybe decade, the kind of Trump era, or did that happen before Trump as well?
It's happened throughout my
Really?
tenure.
It must be very frustrating.
I remember in my first term in office, I had to subpoena William French Smith, the Attorney General, because he wasn't answering our letters. So it's historical. It's the normal conflict you'd have between two branches of government that think they're superior to the other one. Or you can include the judges in that too.
Has Congress played into that? I mean, I know a lot of conservatives, myself included, get frustrated that Congress, governs by omnibus and all of that now in a way that seems to be at odds with how the founders envisioned Congress functioning. Has Congress punted too much of its work, in your opinion, to some of these executive branch agencies?
Without a doubt. They're going back to saying that Congress has delegated too much authority, and they're saying to the bureaucrats that we're not going to accept your judgment of what the law says, and you're going to show us in the law that you got the authority to do it. So 2 or 3 cases here in the last 2 or 3 years is balancing it back. But to get back to your question, has Congress delegated too much authority? Yes, over 80 years. Just think the recent trade policies of this administration, just a little bit more severe than previous administrations under both Republicans and Democrats. But that's all because Congress in 1962 and 1974 delegated one of its 18 powers to regulate interstate and foreign commerce, delegated it to the president. Now, you can take that back, but you can imagine if you don't have 2/3 vote to take it back, the president isn't going to give it up.
Why did that happen? I mean, it seems like everyone kind of agrees it did happen, but why on earth did Congress start letting these agencies do so much of its own authority?
I think laziness. You got to write legislation more specific. And it's really easy to say, well, we don't really know whether we should use this word or that sentence. Let's just say, let's give a broad authority and then let the regulators figure it out. That's what the Supreme Court is now turning the corner on. And the other case I'm thinking of is the Chevron case.
Oh, Chevron, yes, of course. Yes, of course. And a great example of what you're talking about.
And the West Virginia case and the major, that's got the major
EPA, West Virginia
question.
Right.
In other words, anything over $100 million, I think, economic impact, you better show us in the law exactly where Congress gave you the authority to do it. Now, this is going to put a big burden on Congress to write this legislation more specifically.
Brains, right.
That's what we should be doing all the time anyway.
So on that note, I've heard people who've served for a long time in the House or the Senate say that Washington used to be different, that Washington used to be a more collegial place, a friendlier place. So I wanted to ask, Senator, if you agree with that, and if you do, when it changed.
Okay, let me start with saying something I'm very sincere about saying. I don't think a single senator dislikes me, and there's no senator I dislike, and if anybody dislikes me, I don't want to know who they are. And then another thing I think is pretty important is the fact that I try to work in a bipartisan way. So don't take my word for it. Go to the Georgetown University website, click on Senator Lugar Center, and they do an index every year, and I'm always in the top 12, sometimes in the top 5. Nobody can beat Senator Collins, and
That's for sure.
and it'd be useless to try. But and then also remember, the Senate as an institution drives bipartisanship because of the 60 vote requirement to shut off debate to get to finality on a bill. The biggest way it's changed in the 45 years I've been in the Senate is the first 25 or 30 years, we used to start at 10 a.m. on Monday and go till 4 p.m. on Friday.
Wow.
And now nothing starts until Now, this week is going to be an exception because we're going to be in session this week to finish the tax bill.
Right.
But this happens a couple times a year. So take the usual pattern. We start the first vote at 5:30 on Monday. We work a full day Tuesday, a full day Wednesday, and usually by 2 in the afternoon Thursday, it's shut down. Now, I want to make very clear, for an individual senator, there's enough work between Iowa and here. You can work 7 days a week if you want to. Now, I'm not saying I work 7 days a week, but there's plenty of work to do. More than just when the Senate's in session. But if you're going to solve this country's problems, you got to spend more than 2.5 days a week doing it. I'd even suggest that it'd be better if you're only going to work 10 days a month, do 2 5-week sessions and stay in session long enough to get things done, and then go home for 2 weeks and do your state work at home during that period of time. Now, that's a little bit of a facetious comment, but we got to do things more efficiently, and we're doing it. We're basically nothing but a confirmation body, confirming nominations all the time. This administration, or this Senate under Thune, has passed more legislation than Schumer did in the last 2 years. But there's still a lot more we got to do. I keep bringing up, we haven't passed a new 5-year farm bill.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be done in 23. It hasn't been done. I think it'll be done this year. And then there's 65 or 70 of us want to get prescription drug prices down by bringing pharmaceutical benefit managers under control, PBMs. Nobody knows what they do. And if we knew what they do, we'd find out some way of reducing prescription drug prices. How are you going to get those things up if you're just working 2.5 days a week?
That's a good question. And that'll be my last question, Senator, actually, because this is what you're working on right now. It's the big, beautiful bill. And I know that there's been this imposed July 4th deadline. How are you feeling about the Senate's ability to do exactly what you just described? Legislate, negotiate, and get something passed that hopefully from your perspective will be good for your constituents. Do you think you'll make it by the deadline?
Probably by Saturday night.
Wow.
See, I hope anyway.
Your colleagues will have to do some work on the weekend.
The better answer to your question is pretty simple. The leader, and I'm proud of him for saying this, we're going to stay in session till we get this done, starting tomorrow or the next day. Stay in session till we get it done. It's got to be done. You can't. If you don't get this bill passed, you're going to have the largest tax increase in the history of the country. $4.7 billion. $1 trillion over a 10-year period of time. It's going to really hurt the middle class if we don't do it. And this bill, the Democrats are saying this bill is nothing but cut taxes for billionaires. There isn't a rate change from 2017, so that's intellectually dishonest to say that. And it does a lot for working men and women, like through the not taxing tips, and it helps senior citizens with a special credit for them, and it helps overtime pay and the economic benefits that comes from that. We got to get this bill passed because the economy is going to be disrupted very much if we have that big tax increase. And if we do pass it, it's going to really help the economy grow.
Well, Senator Chuck Grassley, it has been my pleasure to have you here for this live taping of Undercurrents with YouTube in session. Thank you so much for the slice of your time on a very, very busy week.
Thank you. Thanks.